All right, we are now live on YouTube, and at 7:33 p.m. I'll call to order this regular meeting of the Reading Board of Education for January 7th, 2021. And present for the board are myself, Chris Parkin, Heather Whaley, Colleen Pilato, Stephanie Olton, and Chris Hocker, and members of the administration and public. The first item of business is public comment this evening. If any members of the public have comment, please indicate so by raising your hand in the participant window or otherwise taking steps to make yourself known. You can take yourself off mute if needed. Seeing no members of the public wishing to comment, we'll move on to board member comment. Any board member comment this evening?
I would like to thank Dr. Harrison for your thoughtful note that you sent regarding the recent events.
Thank you, Heather. Any other board member comment this evening? If not, we will turn on to agenda item number 4, the presentation of the 2021-2022 operating budget. And I would turn it over to Dr. Harrison.
Thank you very much. If you could give me, oh, I'm sorry, I do have it. So I'm gonna just walk us through this, superintendent's recommended budget for fiscal year 22. So looking at 21-22, I want to start by saying a bunch of thank yous. So I want to say a huge thank you and shout out to Clarence and his team, to Vicky and to Stephanie, and especially to our administrators who've been working hard to look at our resources and really make some meaningful, thoughtful decisions about what's needed for our students for next year. And then also thinking about how we could really focus on extending some of the good foundation that's been laid in the past and building on that as we're getting into next year. For this first opportunity, this first pass, I really want us to have an opportunity to get a high level look at the proposed budget. I know that we have a process in place that's going to let us give us an opportunity to dig in deeper and to answer lots of questions that board members may have about specific details. And so looking forward to getting to that piece as well. I do want to say, just with this being my first time presenting a budget to the board in this new role, and also having Clarence new, I felt like it was very important to bring forth a budget that does not already represent any cuts. So I felt like that would be a good way for us to have some really good dialogue around where the values are, and just getting some additional direction from the board through the conversations and the questions, and helping us to tweak the budget to make sure that it is something that our community could live with. So I say that just as a little preface so that you don't get sticker shock when we get to the end, because we know that this is just a first pass. I always like to begin budget presentations with the why, and really just taking a quick opportunity to talk about, you know, this is why we do what we do, right? So it is about our students. It's about thinking about their needs and really focus on them. And of course, this has been a really unusual year. So as I was even just pulling pictures for this presentation, you know, all the greatest pictures of smiles and kids really excited, they were unmasked. And so I really wanted to sort of paint a picture of, you know, this is what our school year looks like. And we're seeing kids learning in different environments and having new experiences, but really that center picture, RES's heart. And I would say that for both schools in the whole district, really hanging on to what's most meaningful for our students. And I think that it is fitting to be having this conversation today, because I think that for for us as a district, with all of our students, it's been, we've wanted to take the time and just remember the big picture and think about why it is that we do what we do. And that's really about shaping the future through our students, one student at a time. So the other piece is, I think it's really important to have a really clear theory of action. And so my theory of action when it comes to budget development is, if we employ responsible financial practices to develop transparent budgets, then we will gain and increase support of our taxpayers and our community to continue offering valuable learning experiences and programs to our students. So that's just sort of a picture of the thinking that's working in the background. The things that we'll talk about tonight are aligned to our mission, our enduring goals and aspirations. Hopefully this is becoming very familiar to everyone to see this. I think it's so important for us to always have things that we are connecting back to. The mission of ER9 is to educate and nurture our students as they grow into self-directed, knowledgeable, critical thinkers, and compassionate, engaging community members. And then we see those three enduring aspirations and goals around academic excellence, building a caring community, and then cultivating future-ready learners. At December's board meeting, we had our principals take some time to talk about the school goals and priorities, and just wanted to take a moment and just highlight these two pieces for each of our schools. I know that our principals and their teams really spent a lot of time thinking critically about this and how this would shape this year. And so when I talk about next year's budget, naturally we're talking about building on the progress toward these goals. And so in Reading, really digging in, our RES students and families demonstrating active engagement and personalized approaches to social and emotional learning, communication, academic instruction, and support provided by our RES staff. And then of course at John Reid, really focusing on three broad categories: student engagement, technological skill development, and social emotional learning, and using that social emotional learning as a way to really dig into diversity, equity, and inclusion with the intent of making sure that all of our students and our staff members feel valued. So just a quick snapshot. I'm sure everyone on the call is very familiar with our schools. But this is for all of the thousands of people who will watch this video later on YouTube. So just as a reminder, we have two schools in Reading: Reading Elementary, which where we have 482 students and 69 staff members with an I'm sorry, Reading has 117 staff members. That's backwards. I knew that that was going to happen. With accountability index of 88.6. And then John Reid, 333 students in grades 5 through 8, 69 staff members, and an accountability index of 80.7. So tonight, I'm going to be talking about the overall budget in these broad categories. We'll talk about sort of what's built into each of the categories in the places where it may not make obvious sense right away. But this really gives a breakdown as to sort of how we as a district are utilizing the funds that are entrusted to us to spend on our students. And so almost 60% of our proposed budget is related to salaries, and then over 16% with benefits. Transportation is obvious there. Obviously, we have to get our students to school every day and home. This also includes special education transportation as well. When we're looking at tuition, that is looking at about 3.5% of our budget annually goes towards any outplaced tuition, and also, Clarence, correct me if I'm wrong, magnet tuition is also included in there as well, correct?
That is correct.
Just under 3% of our budget annually is allotted towards central office, which, as we all know, is shared with the Eastern Board of Education and the Region 9 Board of Education. 2.5% around that goes towards utilities. One of the things that I always share when talking about school budgets is we don't get the friends and family discount when it comes to utilities. And so we can always anticipate that these are areas that are rising costs year over year that we should expect. And I know that our team does a really good job looking for opportunities to save money, and then also looking for ways to make purchases that are really fiscally responsible and really planning ahead. Under professional services, this is what's built in here is a lot of the resources and services that are directed towards our students with IEPs primarily, but there are additional services that students may receive outside of the building, or even bringing in professionals to work with our students. But it's not just our SPED students here, and so that's important to note. There were a number of small categories when we were talking about the best way to present these overall categories. There were a number of small things that we combined together. We just felt like it made sense. And so rather than looking at tiny little slivers of the pie, 2.1% of this overall budget is related to instructional supplies and equipment. What's also built into instructional supplies and equipment is the curriculum resources, professional learning that happens, curriculum development. So we combined all of that together as well. Operations and maintenance is exactly what it sounds like. The 2.05% of the budget that's related towards keeping our, maintaining our buildings and operating our buildings. And I'm going to have Clarence just take a moment and talk about the last two categories: technology, contracts, and supplies, and non-instructional supplies and equipment. And together, those are really only just about 1.5% of the total budget. Clarence?
Yeah, so to Reido's earlier point, and try to keep the pie chart from being too busy, a bunch of less than 1%, we lump things like Power School and other contracts that we have into, including also computers. So things that are technology related, we lumped it together. Otherwise, we had one thing that was 18.18%. So it just makes sense. So we just sort of lump those together. Non-instructional supplies includes general miscellaneous office type material or things of that nature that aren't involved with instruction, but are necessary to operate the building, but they're not operational or facilities related. So those, when you get the detailed budget, you'll see that broken out. But once again, in order to lump things together and make the chart a little bit more readable, we lump those things together, given the small percentage impact on the overall budget.
And so for all of our board members who have been through this budget process a number of times, what's working behind the scenes here, your materials will be very familiar to you. You'll still get the object codes and the function, I just lost the word, function.
Function summary and object summary.
Thank you, function summary and object summary. So you'll still be able to see that and really drill down to those line items. But we felt like this was a good sort of broad way to look at where are we directing those resources. So I'm going to take some time and dig into each one of these and lift out some of the pieces that are that I want to highlight in tonight's discussion. And again, all of these are built into the overall details that you'll see. So I want to start with RES. So under salaries and benefits, just a couple of things that we want to hone in on. So we are proposing for an additional grade 1 teacher, and really this will be moving one of our current grade 1 teachers up to grade 2 and then backfilling that position. And of course, anytime we're talking about increasing the number of teachers at either school, that is directly driven by our projected enrollments for next year. Our principals at our monthly meetings have done a really good job with keeping us abreast on where we are with the Prouder report. So looking at our number of students enrolled by grade level every month, and then really tracking whether or not those numbers are increasing or decreasing. On Tuesday, we discussed that that the board has requested from our principals just some additional details around when students are coming or going, where are they going, right? So are some of those new enrollments people coming from out of town, moving into the area new? How many students did we have with some of the transition this year that may have left and gone to private schools, and what can we anticipate coming back? So with that, we're proposing a new position for that grade 1 teacher. You'll also see here an additional 0.4 FTE for a PE teacher, and that is to bring that teacher, that PE teacher, to 1.0. Right now they're at 0.6. So at RES we have 1.6 PE teachers, and this is really needed in order to distribute the teaching load more equitably among the FPA staff. Our PE students, or all of our students are getting PE twice a week. So our PE teachers have double the number of classes that they're seeing on a weekly basis. This $21,000 related to this additional 0.4, we talk about maximizing the return. So we're getting a lot of bang for our buck. So it's not just the PE instruction that will benefit from, but it's also having the additional FBA teacher there that could, when they are working with students at a grade level, that really ensures that our grade level teachers, our content teachers have the capacity to collaboratively plan. The SPED teacher, the 1.0 SPED PreK teacher that you see there, I listed in the comment section that that's current. So this is a position that was not in last year's budget. This is a position that's actually living in the building now. And so you'll see it standing out, looking like a new position, but it's someone that we've already secured for this year. We are proposing a part-time recess supervisor as a reinstatement at about $8,000. And then a half an hour increase for our cafeteria aides at $2,500, and then the increase of a custodian at about $40,000. So those are the new FTEs specifically related to RES. And you'll see that there's sort of a combination of new and then also reinstating or maintaining what we already have. When we're looking at John Reid, we are proposing to increase 0.5 music teacher. We had some good discussion about how long it's been since we've had that music teacher on board. We feel like this is a really good opportunity to expand and deepen our current programs. Really considering, adding to the strings. One of the things I shared when I was talking with principals is I don't want to be the former music teacher superintendent, not really supporting the arts. I think that this really goes to the bigger picture of who we want our students to be and what are the goals that we have for them. As I was going through my entry period with and getting to know our staff and getting to know our families, one of the things I heard repeatedly that was a source of pride for our Reading families was our commitment to arts, and not just visual arts, but also performing arts. And so you'll see that reflected there. The addition of a grade 5 teacher will allow for the middle school to really have the staff that they need as we're transitioning our students from 4th to 5th grade. We started this year with increasing the number of 4th grade teachers that we have. That's a big cohort of students. That cohort is moving to 5th grade. And so we want to make sure that we could maintain the way that the administration has assigned classes to those teachers where they're focusing on specific content areas. Without that teacher, we talked about, what would happen if that wasn't a possibility. And it really would create some awkward scheduling and end up pulling some of our upper grade level teachers working with some of our younger students at the middle school, and just really create some odd teaming. The other piece that I think is unique about the John Reid is that it has a fifth grade connected to the school. And so one of the challenges that of course we is a potential challenge without having this teacher is the certification, and really just trying to work through all of that. So that's a new position. The additional 0.2 FTE for speech language pathologists, that's primarily driven by student need, and making sure that we have the right ratios of teachers working with our students. That 0.2 is around $15,000. The 1.0 Learning Commons para at around $18,000. That is really in response to what we've seen as the changing roles of what's happening in Learning Commons or media centers or libraries, and really this focus on future-ready learning. So this year has been a significant year related to, I'm sorry, you all just disappeared. It's prompting me to sign in again. Give me a second.
We just want to make sure that you can juggle multiple things all at once.
I appreciate that.
Anytime.
This feels like my interview all over again.
Oh, no.
Okay. Am I sharing again?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So looking at the Learning Commons para, so we've really been focused this year on building our students' capacity, our teachers' capacity around digital learning. One great resource that we've had throughout that process is being able to use our middle school media specialists as an instructional coach, working with our teachers, collaborating with them on lessons. That's something that we wanted to keep moving forward. And this new Learning Commons para would allow the work in the Media Center to continue, because that's also just a really important resource and really great spaces for our students to learn. I know during the contract negotiations, we were able to meet in that space and had some good conversation about how that room is used differently. And so having that additional para there would be helpful. And then you'll see student activities and clubs. That 22.5 is a reinstatement for the stipends and related to all of our student activities at the middle school. And my understanding is that that had been previously cut, and so our administration is asking for that to be returned. So with each of these categories, so I put salaries and benefits together. Again, as I mentioned, these are just a couple of pieces that I'm lifting out, things that are new. We'll talk at the end sort of what the combined, what's the total cost for salaries and benefits, what that increase is in the proposed budget, and what percent of that of the total budget is it. So we'll jump into that now. And then after this slide, I'll give you an opportunity to ask any questions. So salaries and benefits together is about 77% of the total budget. And this is not any information that's new. You'll see that there's, for salaries, there's about a $540,000 or $44,000 increase in our proposed budget for next year. Some of that is related to those new FTEs, those new requests or restorations or reinstatements, but then also just related to our negotiated contractual increases with our REA. And then, of course, you see the benefits that correlate to that, and a 0.9% increase.
Right, Al, may I add something?
Sure.
On the benefits, the medical insurance is a plug number. We've used this year's number since we have made the meeting. We're having a future meeting and deciding what we're going to allocate for medical insurance. So until we have that number will obviously change based on what decisions you all make as a collective group about medical insurance reserves we will do for next year. And that we'll hopefully have that discussion later on this month. So once you make that decision, we'll update this information. But right now, it's a flat line from this year.
So any questions about salaries and benefits?
I mean,
With respect to the new,
yeah,
go ahead, Colleen.
I always have questions, but this meeting would go on for days. So maybe what I could do with my questions is route them through Chris.
Yeah, and so that's a good point. So on Tuesday, Chris mentioned setting up a framework for board members to submit any questions that you have that will come to administration. We'll gather answers and send them back for you. So thanks, Colleen, for mentioning that. And really, so when I'm thinking about questions now, just any sort of clarifying questions for things that we've discussed or presented.
Yeah, just to clarify on this slide, the 33,855 and the benefits, I assume that's with respect to the new positions proposed in the previous slide then? If everything else is held flat?
Yes.
Okay. And when we look at the salary in the previous slide, the 55K roughly for the grade 1 teacher, is that salary plus benefits or is that purely the salary number?
That's purely the salary.
Okay.
Because you got to remember, some of those positions, Chris, they're people already here. So some won't have as much of a benefit increase because they're already here. It's just it's an FTE increase, and some are actually new positions. And so it's sort of a mixed bag.
Right. Every year we sort of have to go through the same process of making sure we have clarity when we look at a position's value, whether that's fully loaded or just salary or what we're really looking at. So
those are pertinent and relevant questions.
So I'm going to press on to our next area, and that's around transportation. So we see $96,660 increase in transportation. And as I mentioned earlier, built into transportation is not just our contract with First Student, but it's also the proposed or anticipated transportation costs related to outplacements. This next piece, I'm sorry, just one last thing to mention about transportation, that's 7.72% of the overall budget. This next category, looking at tuition, come on. Tuition accounts for about 3.47% of the total budget. And so what we see here is a pretty significant increase of $232,400 and some change. So that's a 39.4% increase. So we know that even though at the top of the presentation, I mentioned that tuition built into this number is magnet tuition that we have to pay for. But this is really focused on, as you can imagine, the tuition for outplacement costs. It is, I don't have to go through the whole, we're responsible as a district to meet the needs of our students with IEPs. If we cannot meet their academic or social and emotional needs within the district, then it is incumbent upon us to incur the cost of outplacements. I remember shortly after Clarence started in his first Reading meeting, I think it was, there was some discussion about this idea that maybe people are drawn to us because we take care of our students with IEPs especially well. And I don't think that we don't. I think that we do a really good job with that, and I'm very proud of that. But I don't think that, I've heard that said in a number of districts because it often seems like students who are coming new to us are coming with pretty significant needs. So we do see this number increase, and Jen Del Conte and her team, they've been doing a lot to really anticipate what some of those costs are. I want to dig in a little bit deeper with that and just look at the projected placement and transportation costs together. So you'll see these. This is specifically for what we're expecting, what we're anticipating current costs to be for several of our John Reid students. And you'll see down at the bottom, we have this 8 for no bridge or 2 for bridge. And so one of the things that we've talked about a number of times is that one of the best things that we could do for our students with IEPs who have significant needs where it may otherwise be a challenge for us to meet those needs within the district is to develop programs to keep them in district, really build that internal capacity for us as a district to meet their needs. There's the obvious potential savings related to that from a financial standpoint, but there's also, and we've talked about this before, just the benefits to students, not just the students who we would otherwise have to outplace, but also to our typically developing students, and really helping them to really build their social and emotional skills with learning alongside kids who may be different than them. And so what you see here is the potential cost of transportation and outplacement if we don't establish this new Junior Bridges program. And Jen talked about this, kind of gave a nod to this, I think 2 meetings ago, that it was something that we were considering looking at creating a Junior Bridges program in Reading to address some of the needs that we knew were coming and to also avoid having to outplace some of those students. So I'll dig in just a little bit on this next screen.
Right, before you leave, can I add something?
Sure.
I think it's important for the board to understand the previous slide with the cost for tuition does not include these numbers. These are 10 students that Jen's team has yet to make a determination about how we're going to service their needs. So the previous slide are students we've already taken care of. We know where it's going. We know we have an estimate of the cost. These are 10 additional students. And Jen has said 2 of them, those in the gray and light gray, she definitely will have to outplace, if I remember correctly. And there's others that she thinks if we built a program, she might be able to keep them in. So the question for the board is, what path do we take at the fork in the road? Do we build a program for those kids so we have a pathway, or do we just not, and then we have to find an outplace location for them? So I just want to make it very clear, these numbers don't include the previous slide.
So to be clear, the previous slide is a baked in quasi non-negotiable increase. And this slide is a choice between 2 increases depending on which way we go.
Yes, the previous slide is students we've already identified, they're already placed. We know we're in negotiations about settlements, etc. So those are already sort of, as you said, baked in their address. These are students that I understand from Jen that we have yet to determine how we're going to service their needs. So we have a fork in the road to decide, do we build an internal program to service their needs? We can't service all of them, but I think it was 6 out of the 8. Or do we send them all out at the cost associated with transportation and outplacement?
And do either of these slides reflect excess cost reimbursement, or is it all gross cost?
The previous one does.
Okay.
And so this next slide then looks at, this would be the proposed staffing for a Junior Bridges program. So we would, we estimate needing it would be the cost of an additional SPED teacher at around $68,000, and then an additional special ed para at just under $17,000. So the cost of this new program then would be $85,274. And so, as Clarence mentioned, when we're talking about having that fork in the road, You know, our proposal would be that we establish this new program. It would, I feel like it's the fiscally responsible thing to do, but it's also the morally responsible thing to do. And I think it really allows us to build capacity within the district and could really benefit our students.
Right now, I want to make one clarifying point. The total cost is higher than that. We have 3 existing paras that would go to the program. So it's not additional costs, they're already here, but if you include it, you got to include those 3 paras in the cost of the program, but they're already here, so it's not additional cost. I just want to make sure that's clear.
Thank you, Clarence. So any questions about kind of those 2 pieces, looking at the tuition and just understanding those 3 slides together?
Yeah. If I can ask, going back to the increase in the tuition costs, maybe tonight's the wrong time to dig into that, but understanding, you know, where the new costs come from. In other words, are these kids newly in the district? Are these kids have to be outplaced to a more expensive program? That's such a big percentage increase that it would be really helpful to understand how that comes about. And you don't have to answer me now if it's better to wait and dig in later, but that struck me.
Can you back up one more to that slide?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one.
That one.
Yeah. To understand where that, and that's something that's going to, I mean, my guess is that increase by itself is going to be a significant, I mean, that's like 1% right off the bat,
Right.
give or take. So, you know, understanding that is going to be really important when we get to communication time with the public.
So Chris, just to give you sort of, without going into detail, approximately 183,000 that are known outplacements. They're known, it's baked in, it's using the other Chris's parlance. Another 204,000 are not yet finalized, means we're in the midst of negotiations about, so the cost, so that's an estimate on our part about what it will cost. And since we're in negotiations, we don't want to disclose too much because then it can be used against us in our negotiations with the families. So that's how we're breaking up known outplacements and not yet finalized outplacements.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but my question is really going to go to, so how did that come about? Are these kids who have been in district, but because of PPEs or whatever, it has been determined that they need outplacements, or are they kids who are new in the district? You know, that kind of question. And I'm not looking for you to break it down, but it right now, but so that if somebody asked me the question, you know, where did this number come from? I'd have to be, I'd need to say, well, it's because we've had, then whatever the reason is. Right. And I don't know what the reason is. And it could be a combination of reasons. It probably is. But that's all I'm asking for. And again, doesn't have to be tonight.
Sure. So Chris, just so that you know, obviously we've had a lot of that conversation. Excuse me, and I'll have Jen Del Conte just put some talking points together for us that we could share.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a key area of understanding. As everybody understands that special ed costs are a key understanding that requires understanding and communication.
Absolutely.
And it's a frequent area of frustration, I think, both amongst board members and the public, because it is a bit of a black box area in that it's inappropriate for obvious reasons to get into the detail on each individual case, but the aggregate result is obviously substantial.
Right.
This is another comment unrelated, but just generally, is that it helps me to think of costs in terms of the personnel costs, in terms of the fully loaded personnel costs. And I'm assuming that in one of the later slides, when you referred to an additional cost of 58,000 or whatever the number was, that was not the fully loaded cost.
That is correct. So given we can make assumptions about benefits, but everyone will choose whether it's single or two family or two person or family, it changes their benefit rate. So we can make that assumption. The way it's presented here is the salary, it's presented as salary only, and then benefits are assumptions about benefits for the new staff that we're proposing.
Right, I understand, but in the past, there has been a kind of universal benefit number per person that sort of averages out. So that from the point of view of understanding the true personnel costs, I realize you don't know from individual to individual whether it's single or double or family or whatever. I get that. But for budgeting purposes and clarity purposes, I think it would be helpful to, I don't want to say contrive, but come up with a number that kind of represents globally the benefit load.
We can easily do that because we even with salaries, we're making an assumption because we don't know what the credentials any hired employee will have. So it could be lower or higher. So we make an assumption. So we can that's very easy to make a similar assumption about the benefits package.
I think that's helpful again because to talk about somebody costing 68,000 when in fact the true cost is 88. I'm just making this up.
Yep.
Whatever those numbers are. Again, it's a communications issue rather than sort of saying, well, okay, there's these different personnel costs, and then we got a whole basket of benefits here that we don't break down. I don't think that's effective.
And of course, in a world where we're self-insured on the largest benefit component, anyway, the allocation rate number that we'd be using as a placeholder is itself an estimate amongst estimates because we're eating the cost regardless. It's just a question of the share in which the employee is contributing. So,
and we get that, but I would rather sacrifice. I mean, the budget's going to be imprecise anyway, depending on what happens during the year. But I would rather see kind of the full cost as opposed to broken down another way. And I think it's easier for the public to understand that as well. I'm going to ask one more question. Sorry, Chris. But this is kind of for clarity for the public's sake. I'm assuming this budget assumes full-time in-person all year.
Yes.
Okay, right.
Yes.
Okay.
This is our light at the end of the tunnel budget, assuming that things will look like normal.
Yeah,
this feels like the most normal conversation we've had in 9 months. So.
Yeah.
Great. I'm done monopolizing that.
So the next area that we had was central office. And so central office is about 2.8% of the total budget. You'll see a $46,000 increase from this current fiscal year to the proposed budget next fiscal year. One thing that we could talk about some of the details here, but one big piece that will be a change is you'll see the reduction of the data analyst. And so I know that this was a piece that is living in our current budget and has been resources that have been allocated, and we had not hired that position. As you know, when I started in August, this was that position was vacant, and I wanted sort of an opportunity to get the lay of the land and really take a look at what do I feel like our needs, getting to understand and know how our central office is functioning. So I don't want to say that there's not a need for a data analyst, but I think that what we've seen, and particularly this year, There are so many things about this year that we are looking forward to having in the rearview mirror, mask wearing and hybrid and, all out, like all of those pieces. One of the things that is not going away is the need for robust support around digital learning and technology, and really thinking about that digital integration piece connected to our future ready learners. And that is an area that I really believe we would benefit from having some dedicated support across all 3 districts with having a director of digital learning and technology. And so you'll see that we had $80,000 in the budget set aside for this current school year, which would have then rolled over for next year as with the data analyst. So we are cutting that position and then requesting the creation of the Director of Digital Learning and Technology at $160,000. We have been very fortunate in Reading to have the skills from several of our staff members, in particular our stick and her work, not just supporting both schools and teachers, but also supporting, offering some additional support with our teachers and staff in Reading, and then collaborating with our folks in Region 9 as well. This position would be a sort of mix of the digital learning integration, so really the coaching support, the plan for really shaping and rethinking what learning and instructional delivery looks like in the 21st century. So here we are, we're talking about fiscal year 22, so 22 years into the 21st century, we're still talking about the acquisition of 21st century skills. But this position would really work closely with Dr. Pearson-Ugal to talk about the curriculum and instructional piece with the National Digital Learning Standards, and really see some nice tie-in with that, and also really support work around STEM. So that's one piece. Then there's what I like to call sort of the under the hood part. So I love talking about the digital learning component of what's happening in the classroom, but then there's also the plan for hardware and software. There are specialties around, fiber and working with our facilities folks to ensure that we have the necessary infrastructure to meet the learning needs that we have. And so this position would, across all 3 districts, really guide that work and work in collaboration with some of the support people that we have already in several of our buildings. And so that's where part of the increase is coming from. And you'll see that we are also, so that $46,000 increase obviously does not account for the entire $80,000 increase. So there's also some baked in savings there. Clarence, if you want to talk about a couple of those things, we're seeing some cost reductions.
We've got some, there's some journal wage increases for some staff at central office, and we've made some platform changes that result in some cost savings. So we're just, once again, just trying to be more efficient about what we're doing. So the digital technology position represented about $26,000 of that 46. So you get an additional $20,000 of just efficiencies and general wage increases for the staff here.
Is this Reading's portion of, like our board's portion of it, or is that the whole office, central office budget altogether? Did you already say that?
That's Reading's portion.
Reading's portion.
Can you clarify in central office whether this includes the receptionist position? I'm fairly certain that was sort of carried over as a placeholder. Was that rolled into the data analyst? I forget what fiscal year that sort of faded out.
I think Clarence is checking on that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, there is no receptionist position currently in the, and I think
Okay.
it was probably rolled into the data analyst. We don't
Okay,
currently have a
that's-
receptionist.
I believe
position.
that's correct.
That, as I was asking the question, that I was sort of answering it myself. Thank you.
That's what I remember too. I remember that the data analyst was replacing. Yeah, I remember that.
Any other questions about central office?
And just while we're on the topic for the board, if you could let me know before the 26th, if there's any particular detail you'd like to hear about the central office budget when it's presented to the tri-board, I think that would be helpful to both Rydell and Clarence.
And at that meeting, we have put together a draft of a job description. I know that there had been previous discussion about Director of Technology. And so we use that kind of as a framework to build off of that. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that at the joint meeting. So 2.44% of the total budget is related to utilities. You'll see there a very marginal decrease from current year to next year. I don't know that we want to dig into how we're saving $249, but I'm sure anytime there's an opportunity to talk about savings, I'm sure we'd be happy to do that. But for now, we'll press on to the smaller pieces of the pie. So 2.4% of our total budget is related to professional services. And at the top, I just mentioned that these are related to a lot of the services that work with our students with IEPs. Clarence, did you want to add anything, any other specifics to this?
That also can include like outside professional coaching, any sort of like a professional provider that's not sort of like an outside vendor that does maintenance on the building, something dealing with the professional aspects of the students or the kids.
So instructional supplies and equipment, that's 2.1% of the total budget. And so you'll see $162,000 increase. So from a percentage standpoint, it looks like a huge increase there. What some of this is shifting around some of those resources. And I want to just dig in a little bit to what's baked in here. And so one of the things we've recently been talking about, obviously at the last board meeting, the K-5 new math program. But before that, I want to talk about the K-4 Future Ready Library workstations at RES. And so in their media center, they are proposing to do some reconfiguring to really create some new workstations to build our students' capacity around digital learning. In some of the conversations I had with Natalie, she shared that, you know, it was just a few years ago that we had some of our students who had not really had much experience even turning on a computer. And they've done some really good work around building those skills. And so this is just some resources directed directly towards the library. I don't have an amount there. We'll zero in on that when we look at that more detailed budget. But it's really looking at redirecting some resources away from what would typically be used on increasing library books and developing these workstations instead. We had some good conversation on Tuesday around the K-5 new math program and the professional learning that will go along with that. You know, Stephanie and also John worked really well with our curriculum committee to chart a path forward for this program. We have a placeholder in there for that number. And for right now, we're still in negotiations with finalizing where that will land. And so we could talk a little bit more about that. We know that program is K-5. We're not getting new math materials for 6th through 8th grade. And so we've set aside some resources to focus on math curriculum development with our teachers. And then the last piece for both of our schools is curriculum development and professional learning related to our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And so this is kind of working in two pieces. And so one is Dr. Pearson-Ugel is working closely, will be working closely with our teachers to bring them in, do some curriculum development work over the summer. And so setting aside some monies for that. And really focusing, I think that the initial focus is really digging into humanities and thinking about how we can apply the equity lens to that work and make some, do some curriculum development work there. But then also planning for professional learning with some outside resources going forward into next year. And so really being able to develop a pretty comprehensive professional learning plan related to DEI that would really be focused on our pre-K-8 teachers and then some work with students as well. We'll start priming some of that this year using some of the internal resources that we have to work with our teachers around professional learning. And by internal resources, I mean me, which I'm very excited about that. You know, I'm free. So that's there's some savings there, which I think will be great, but then really bringing in some folks to continue and building on that foundational work. We know that we have our DEI task force that has already had their first meeting. One of the goals of that task force over the next several months is to develop a comprehensive improvement plan that would guide the work of all three districts in the next several years. And we know that a piece of critical piece of that is going to be around professional learning. And so we wanted to make sure that we had some dollars earmarked for that. Stephanie, was there anything that you wanted to add to that specifically, or any of the pieces on the slide?
No, I think you've said it well. I think that when the board members have an opportunity to dig into the dollars and cents of their budget, they will see a significant investment in the outside professional consultant line, and that is really with the DEI work in mind. In the two K-8 districts, we have not yet had an opportunity to invest in the outside consulting we really feel is necessary to dig into the professional learning aspect of their work.
Thank you. Any questions on instructional supplies or equipment? Any of these, any clarifying questions?
With the math, Rydell, in 6-8, the expectation is that we'd be sort of home growing some curriculum resources?
It's less home growing as it is taking resources that have been made available that are more in the open source category and personalizing them so that we can create a pacing guide that works well, and then also adding other published resources as supplemental resources. So all things that we're using currently, but not necessarily in combination.
Okay.
Any other questions? Clarifying questions? So this next piece around operations and maintenance, you'll see an increase, a proposed increase of about $19,000, which is a 4.1% increase. This total slice of the pie is about 2.05% of the total budget. Clarence, did you want to mention anything here about the lawn care services, or do you want to wait and dig into that once we have the?
We can wait. I mean, what this reflects is some cuts. The lawn care service is a new item, so that's gonna be a $20,000+ increase. So to get to the 19,000, we had some cuts elsewhere, but mostly driven by the lawn care.
Is this line inclusive of the increase in custodial staff, or does the custodial staff show up just purely in salaries at the beginning, I assume?
It's probably in the salaries in the beginning.
And so the last two slices of the pie are technology contracts and supplies. That's about 0.9% of the total budget, and non-instructional supplies and equipment, about 0.61% of the budget. You see the huge increase in that first line of $46, and then about a $3,000 increase in non-instructional supplies and equipment. And Clarence talked about sort of what's connected in both of those. I will say, as we're looking at some of our technology contracts, Clarence mentioned that one of the things that's connected in there is our Power School subscription. We're looking at some other options of ways to potentially do cut some costs by looking at some of our technology contracts that we currently have that are standing alone for each district, and working with some reps to see if we could find some efficiencies there and save some additional costs going forward. But that's not yet reflected in this number. And then to wrap up how all of these pieces work together, those are all of the increases. So we see the total proposed budget or the total budget for this current year is $22,573,796. And we are proposing in this first pass an increase of 1.159 million, which is 5.13% over the current budget.
Just looking at it very quickly, 765,000 of that is purely outplacement tuitions and contractual increases in the salary line.
Correct.
Very astute of you.
He's done this before.
He's a ringer.
Yeah, I know, I think we can all see exactly where everyone's eye is drawn. And so the more details that we can have around the tuition line, I think will be helpful.
Sure, and like I said, we'll work on some talking points and understand. I think talking points are helpful for you as board members as you're talking with other people. But for when we're talking about outplacements, it's also really helpful for us because we want to be really conscious of not oversharing mistakenly in a public setting. So really just kind of digging in and but to be able to provide a really clear understanding of where some of those significant increases are coming from. The other thing I think that when we one of the things that we'll do sort of at the next pass where we go to the more detailed pieces is be able to talk about so if we're seeing some increases around money set aside for professional learning, here are some of the other places where some of that money may be coming from and how we're thinking about that as well. So I think that's a piece of that's really, really important that will show, give a good picture of sort of how we're thinking about all of these pieces working together.
And I think also for instructional supplies and equipment, if there is a way, and I think we've talked about this, I don't know, my years on the board are all kind of blurring together, but I think we have talked about in recent history, having a real plan to review for how we anticipate that money being used in the upcoming school year. So I think that also helps people understand the need and the planned execution of, really how is that how does that money benefit our students in the end? So maybe, details about the plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, 4 months in the position, Clarence is 2 months in the position, and we're really lucky to have the collective historical knowledge from our other colleagues in putting all that together. That's been really helpful for us to not just think about sort of where we've come from and how we're here, but then also really thinking about some longer term planning and thinking, particularly when it comes to as we're establishing new programs or jumping into new initiatives, really going into that with a plan for return on investment. And so being able to document that as we go forward, and there are obvious ways I think that we could that's already built in that we're able to do that. So we create a new junior bridges program. We're able then throughout the year to update the board and the community on here's how this is meeting the needs of the students in the way that we anticipated. Here's how this is benefiting us from a resource allocation standpoint. And here's what we're learning along the way to make any mid-course corrections. But I think it's also important to do that same piece regardless of what the initiative is. And so, as we're thinking about making significant increases or investments in our math program overall, I think that that's a great opportunity for us to be able to lay out some benchmarks along the way to say, this is a pretty significant investment for us as a district. Here's what we hope to see as the return along the way and how it's benefiting our staff, benefiting and particularly benefiting our students. So Colin, to your point, I think that we'll want to dig into that and that be a part of the sort of budget development and philosophy for us going forward as well. So not just thinking about this, only while we're in this budget season, but then kind of further down the road, just as part of our ongoing practice, to be thinking really critically about is this having the intended purpose that we had hoped for? And then if it's not, then what do we need to do differently? And just, I think so much of this whole budget development process, there's the part that I am really grateful to have other folks to work on, right? All of the numbers pieces, compiling that information. But then I think the big piece is around the budget philosophy and what do we believe about how we use resources to meet the needs of our students? How does that align with our ongoing long-term goals? How do we measure that along the way? And primarily, how are we demonstrating our goals around being fiscally responsible? And that is something that's really important to me to sort of launch initially in this sort of first pass at this presentation, but then really to continue coming back to that as we go forward.
Yeah. Rydell, I think it goes sort of without saying that this is a big number as a first pass, and that we're going to be looking to you for some guidance with respect to how you would prioritize reductions, whether in program people or otherwise, over the course of the next several weeks. But also, I think it's important to note that the number we're seeing on the screen also does not include that bridges, no bridges choice, which has a cost associated with it regardless. So even if we adopted this number, something would have to come out to accommodate those special services costs.
Correct.
And it also doesn't accommodate what we have to assume is some kind of increase in health insurance allocation. And so if that's even a net increase of $100,000, another $70,000 that has to be added in here.
Correct.
If I can chime in,
Chris,
and sort of take off on what both Rydell and Colleen said. A piece of it to me is to understand the reductions, the savings that have been or will be in the future realized by some of these programs now. In other words, you take it just in isolation, you talk about bringing in a director of digital technology in the central office. Okay, what does that mean in the individual districts? Is that an opportunity to offset costs that otherwise would have been incurred? And I don't know the answer. Or to take that as an example, what future costs will be foregone because we're doing something now, to use your word, investment. So understanding that, to me, is very helpful, where if it's just a number in isolation, well, we want to do this and it's going to cost that, that's nice, but it'd be great if there was a kind of a story that went with that went beyond just this particular fiscal year, if you see what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Chris, I would say that, for example, that Junior Bridges program, it's sort of deja vu for me in that in a previous district, we had this same sort of fork in the road. Do we invest in creating our own program? And we use the term cost avoidance, that if we do this, we can avoid certain costs down the road, whether it be transportation, outplacement. And I think working with Jen and her team, we should be able to do that pretty effectively, sort of to show the cost avoidance to answer your question.
Yeah.
Other things we may not be able to do. I know the Junior Bridges, we
example.
should be able to do that because I've done that in the past.
Yeah, and they've been doing that at the high school. And I know that when I was on that board, that was a big driver for a lot of enthusiastic support on behalf of the board, because they were able to demonstrate reductions in what otherwise could have been outplacements because of the Bridges program. So I'm all for it, but that needs to come out of the discussion as we go down the road here.
Can I ask one question about the Bridges? Would that be something that down the road we could have tuition paying students come here?
Yes, and just an example, in talking with Jen and her team, we have this unique situation where our grade level structure is different from Easton. So right now we have some Reading students attending the Bridges program in Easton. If we were able to do this, we could address potential, even from Easton, fifth graders who need a similar program, which Easton doesn't provide. It doesn't have to be Easton, but it could be from other towns also, yes.
Thanks.
And Heather, to that point, in a previous district, we were able to create a program that generated pretty significant tuition revenue, just in partnership with other districts. So there's the opportunity to consider that as well going forward. I think that's part of the sort of charting out and then looking and anticipating what our capacity may look like in the future.
It might be helpful if we knew from if we could get some sort of stats from surrounding districts. Like if we already had this, who nearby would be excited to send us some kids? Sure,
and so I don't want to speak for Jen, but I know that SPED directors, just like superintendents, we have our network, and our CNI folks, Dr. Pearson-Ugel, Stephanie has her network of people. I know Jen does as well. And so one of the things that they, I'm sure, do is sort of talk about who has what sort of special programs, and really kind of thinking strategically about what some of those needs are. And so I think that there are some more opportunities, I think, for us.
Great.
And could we also look at it in terms of this can't be a short-term investment in Junior Bridges? This has to be something that we're looking at on a longer term, and how I'm sure in year 1 and year 2, there's really not a cost benefit, but how that branches out and look at it on a 5 and 10 year perspective.
Sure. So when I did this before with creating a new special ed program, we looked at the initial savings, but then we also looked at to Clarence's point, cost avoidance. And so what happens is if in year 2 or year 3, you can add another student to the program, there's not a requirement for additional staff. And so now your savings with 2 students is this number. Your savings with 3 students is even greater because you're not having to increase staff. So I think that what we wanted to do tonight was sort of pick up on the initial conversation that we had a couple of months ago with Jen, just sort of saying that we have this gap and here's an opportunity for us, and then being able to dig in for some with some additional detail. And that I think will be really beneficial for us for some of that long-term planning as well.
I know if I may add, generally, I don't know about your experience, but my experience, the sort of initial problem beyond staffing a new program is finding space. And I don't think we have that problem. So generally it's a problem trying to find some place to house the program. I literally had to move, in my experience, 5 sort of musical chairs between 5 different classrooms and 4 different buildings to sort of get around to where we wanted it. But if we have the space, and that takes one of the large hurdles off the table that you usually have to spend money that, creating the space or acquiring the space. So if that's not an issue, that's one of the big primary hurdles that we normally would have to deal with.
Are there other questions from the board with respect to Chris? Go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of, because my memory is failing me. Back at the very beginning, when you gave the student count, actually it's not failing me, it was 333 and 482. But my question is that the projected for 21-22 or is that today's?
That is the snapshot of today.
Okay.
I can give you the projected, I just closed that file. I'm trying to think of where it is. I can give you the projected number from the Prado report. That's it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I mean, that always comes into the equation one way or the other.
Sure. Yep.
Because some people like to look at things on a cost per pupil basis. I am not one of them, but it happens. And the other thing, and this is just for my edification, is what is the accountability index? Where did I've never heard that term before, but I'm new to this board. What is that?
Yeah, so that comes from the state report card website, and it looks at at all of the standardized testing, the student performance on the ESPAs, on the next generation science standards. Of course, that's sort of looking back to not this past year. What year was it? 2019. Sorry. So that's looking at 2019 performance. It also takes into consideration things like student attendance, student proficiency on PE standards. So there's a number of pieces, and it really just gives sort of an overall picture of where we are as a district based on all these different measures.
So it's an absolute, not a relative?
Yes.
Okay, so presumably 100 is best and 86 is good and all that kind of stuff. All right, all right. I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
No.
The last time I looked at it, if I remember correctly, the number in the low 80s that John Reid was at put it in the top 10 or 15 middle schools in the state, something to that effect.
Correct.
Okay.
I think, this is Colleen, I think Chris is right though, that I think that slide is going to be, have a lot of views. I think a lot of eyes are gonna look at that slide, and they're gonna compare the number of staff. They're gonna wanna know if those are FTEs or, I see a lot of questions that will come from that slide, but all that can be answered. So it's good information. And I think it's a level of transparency maybe that we haven't shared in that way before.
Before we move on, let me ask if there are other questions from the board with respect to the presentation or initial impressions or clarifying questions for the presentation. All right. The next agenda item is the aptly named discussion of next year's operating budget, which we've mostly gotten into with the Q&A on the presentation as we've gone along. But I did want to have a discussion with the board about next steps and framing the conversation for how we want to approach this. And the first question I'd have for Rydell and Clarence is what your timeline is for making available to the board sort of the finer points in detail that we can start drilling down into.
Chris, I'm glad you asked that. We had actually hoped, Chris is aware of this, when Chris originally asked me whether we want to have this meeting on the 5th or the 7th, and I told him we were, our first day of our new platform is going to be on the 4th, so I didn't want to have it one day later because there'd be some eventual hiccups, and of course they happened. So we were hoping to have the finalized book ready to send out to you today. Those hiccups occurred. We discovered some of them working on it. I suspect we should be able to get something out to you late on Friday at the earliest and early on Monday at the latest. So my goal is as soon as we get it done, if we get it done the weekend, I'll get it delivered out electronically or hard copy to your homes. So we were early about an hour or so ago, I was on the phone with the vendor trying to figure out, there was just a few little quirks, but I suspect we should have an electronic version or hard copy by the end of the day tomorrow at the earliest and the first thing Monday morning at the latest. And if it happens over the weekend, we'll get it to you over the weekend.
Okay. And so what I'll do is
one of those quirks is the 5.13 is really a 2.13.
if that's in the new math curriculum, Chris. That's
Yeah.
Brush method.
So I will circulate to the board a Google form once I get Rydell and Clarence to sign off on its draft, and you can start submitting feedback and questions there once you've had a chance to look at the budget book once it's available to you. Then we can work through it over the course of next Thursday and the 2 meetings in February. What I anticipate probably being the most sensible approach for next Thursday is to take sort of a broad strokes approach to as many content areas as we can to identify areas where we can all agree there's not much to discuss, and identify areas where we need additional information or additional discussion, so we can then build out agendas for February to really drill down into those issues, and that'll give the administration time to resolve those questions also on those content areas. Is that agreeable to everybody? Is there anybody have any questions or concerns about that as an approach, or we'll have time to review sufficiently in advance of Thursday to have a serious conversation?
Can you repeat what the process is going to be if we have questions?
You will receive a link to a form to fill out, and it will dump into a spreadsheet the administration will have access to. They'll be able to populate answers to those that then I can circulate back around so that it's not just emails being forwarded back and forth.
Great, thanks.
Chris, may I share something?
Certainly.
I was thinking about the other Chris's comments about the 5.13. I would just say to all of you, Rydell and I had a discussion about, what would be an appropriate initial number. And we both sort of reached the conclusion that given we're both new and need to sort of learn through iterations how you all think and how you approach things, we figured let's give them sort of the worst case scenario, and we know we can work back from it, because we're trying to learn about what the community is looking for and what they value. And if we make decisions prior to that, what we think shouldn't be there, we deny you the opportunity to give us that input. So I don't want you to be shocked by that number. The point was to tease out of you what the things that you all find valuable. So that way, going forward, we can know that and be able to prepare to go forward. So it's sort of we'll shock you now, but it'll smooth out later just so we can get a better idea what the community values.
And we are under no belief that we are going to be moving forward at 5.1. So that's important for you to know.
I do foresee a collaborative conversation where we have a better understanding on, Rydell, your perspective of what the priorities for the district are as far as your long-term vision for it. And we can chime in with sort of our historical understanding of what those priorities ought to be. And we can, work through the budget in that manner.
That was the intended goal, Chris, to have that dialogue so we can, the budget can reflect the community's desires and needs, and also reflect the building level and central office administration understanding of what the needs are for the children.
Right. And this is the point where everybody looks straight into the camera and says to anybody who's watching this live or on video, this is not the number that is being proposed to go to the Board of Finance or the public. This is the number that starts a conversation.
Well, I see this first select woman's on the call. I gave her a heads up this afternoon, so she won't be shocked.
Any other questions or comments from the board for this evening on this topic before we really drill in next week? John?
No. Just unmuted.
All right, if there are no other comments or questions, thank you, Rydell. Thank you, Clarence. Thank you to the rest of the team for your work putting this together. It was a helpful look into the various pieces of the budget, and we look forward to drilling into the detail over the coming weeks. Moves us to agenda item 6, which is public comment. Anybody wishing to make public comment, please indicate so by raising your hand in the participant window, or otherwise making yourself known.
Hi, Chris. I'm not sure how to raise my hand. I'm on my phone. This is Meredith.
Meredith Ferris?
Ferris, sorry. 26 Ledgewood.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say about the Junior Bridges program that my daughter is a current 5th grader at JRMS, and she is benefiting greatly from the program. She's using Easton, and if we didn't have this program for her, and she was not able to go to Easton to use the program, we'd be in a really bad situation. So I just want to, thank the special ed team for recommending that for her, and just that it's something that I think is very needed in our community. And just that it helped my child out so much. Just being there with other students that she could relate to, it just made her happy. And that's all I want to say. Just that it's, I hope that it gets to stay in. I just think it's really necessary and something that would be really, really great for our town.
Thank you, Meredith. Sarah Odell?
Oh my gosh, I'm never ready to unmute. Hi, Sarah Odell, Black Creek Turnpike. So I just wanted to thank Dr. Harrison for this budget presentation. I've been attending these since we moved to town a number of years ago, and I really appreciated the way also that the board gave us an opportunity to see this from the very beginning. And I also wanted to just say, as part of my thinking as a taxpayer whose taxes have doubled since we moved in, I really appreciate this budget perspective of leaving things in and talking from a position of trying to really meet what our community needs right now. And as the parent of 2 kids, and I think all parents out there can agree it's been a rough year on our kids. And coming from the position of looking to serve them next year and truly meet their needs, because there's going to be increased needs for every student after a year in and out of the classroom and in unusual learning situations. So I really appreciate that you're coming from a place of setting us up for success in this budget. So that's all. Thank you. And I hope that people will be ready to be true advocates for our children in this community during this budget cycle.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other public comment? Seeing none. Board member comment.
Sarah beat me to it. I was going to say something along the same lines there, minus the cuckoo clock in the background. But I did definitely appreciate the opportunity to really have multiple things that we're looking at. And as a board, We've really worked well together over the last few years, and I think that we can help prioritize what's most important for our students. And yeah, I agree. I like the way everything was laid out and spelled out for us, and I'm really looking forward to working with the new administrators on this going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any other board member comment?
Yeah, I want to say that I really appreciate the visuals and the time it took to sort of tell the story about why the numbers are what they are in terms of how it meets our goals as a district, rather than just like, here's the number. So I really appreciate that, and it was very helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. Heather, any other board member comment? All right. Hearing none, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Heather.
Second.
Second, John. Any objection? Hearing none, we will be adjourned at 9:03. Thank you, everyone.